Okay, let's talk about some fish. So, what makes a fish a fish? Well, fish have an endoskeleton, gills, a closed loop circulatory system. That's evolutionarily advanced. They have kidneys for filtration, and they're extremely diverse because we find them in both freshwater and saltwater, such as our beautiful little saltwater clownfish there. Fish have important structures that allow for them to swim, such as fins and a swim bladder and a lateral line. A lateral line allows for them to have balance so they know which way is up while they're swimming. They have an extremely flexible endoskeleton, which allows for them to move. It's almost cartilage, and in some fish, it is completely cartilage. That endoskeleton is really important because inside means endo. They have long pieces of these bones that are extremely flexible. Some of them are able to have they all have a dorsal nerve cord. This is really important. This dorsal nerve cord is what we would consider a spinal cord. It allows for muscles to move within the body, and they're able to have a sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system because of this dorsal cord. So, fish will have fins. Fins are usually paired, but some are not. They help them to turn, to dive, to climb, to escape predators, and to be a great predator. They use pair fins to move backwards and forwards, sideways, and up and down. They regulate their position in the water by controlling the amount of gas they have in a thing called a swim bladder, basically a really large balloon within their body. The swim bladder is able to contract and relax, changing the amount of gas that's in it. This changes its buoyancy, which means if it's really full, they're able to rise to the top. If it's not full of gas, then they sink to the bottom. That's a pretty cool thing when you start talking about a fish swimming. They'll have sensory organs too. Some of them are light sensitive. Some of them have olfactory. By the way, if you put a drop of blood into the ocean, you're probably not going to attract a great white 100 miles away. Their olfactory is not that good. They also have taste buds. They have ears for hearing sounds. And a cool thing with water, the sound will actually travel long distances. So we know that fish are able to communicate over oceans. Fish also have a unique thing called a lateral line. A lateral line is a faint visible line on the side of the fish that allows for them to sense vibration and also to know where their positioning is at within the water. The fishes are able to obtain oxygen from water sources that have dissolved oxygen in them through a process called gills. They don't have lungs, they have gills. Gills, similar to our invertebrate animals, are these rows of filaments, which are finger-like projection that have a villi and allow for gas exchange. They'll also use a countercurrent flow. This allows water to pass over the gills in one direction as the blood flows in the opposite direction through the gills capillaries. This allows for the most oxygen to be diffused within the blood in the entire length. Some species, like sharks, must continue motion because if the counterflow doesn't happen because of their large body size, they'll actually suffocate if they stop. So sharks will even move while they are sleeping. They have a single loop blood circulatory system. Really important, we have a picture of a heart here. They have an atrium and a ventricle. The atrium is on top, the ventricle is on bottom. The deoxygenated blood comes in through the atrium and leaves oxygenated through the ventricle. The blood leaves the gills after it moves through the vessels and enters into the heart. The heart will pump the blood to the gills into a circular loop back and forth. One of the most important things about fish is their excretion process. The body of most vertebrates is about 2/3 water. However, if you live in salt water, you don't want 2/3 of your body to be concentrated salt. And in fact, the salt concentration in seawater is 3 times that of marine fish tissue, which if you think about that, it's pretty crazy. So they're able to lose a lot of water through a process called osmosis. Osmosis is the diffusion of water from a high concentration to a low concentration. In order for saltwater fish to counteract this process, fish drink salt water to help flush the salt from their gills. They're not actually drinking it and ingesting it, they're just flushing it from their gills. Freshwater fish have the opposite problem because their body is hypotonic to a hypertonic water solution. Water will actually go into the fish. Problem. So, what do they do to do this? Well, they have to flush their system as well. And for that reason, they have scales. These scales, though we can still see some movement of water, they do not allow the majority of the water mass to leave the body. It's a tight surface that allows for them to keep their water inside. Really minimizing water loss is key to the evolution of fish. They need to keep the water in. They also have kidneys. Kidneys are filtration organs, and they will regulate the amount of water and salt within the body. This is important because a saltwater fish and a freshwater fish need to regulate the electrolytes that they have within their body. An excess of water in the body is removed and leaves the fish's body in a process called urine. If you would happen to have too many electrolytes, you'll also flush that out in the urine. But you can also develop things like kidney stones if you're not careful. The reproductive of fish. So, most fish will reproduce sexually through external fertilization, but there are some that will reproduce through internal fertilization. Most will go through a process called spawning. Spawning is when males and females get together. Usually they'll swim upstream to the place where they are originally birthed at. The females will lay their eggs, and the male will release its sperm over top of the eggs, causing fertilization to occur. There are some that will release their sperm, and then there are live birth, such as guppies. Guppies will have live birth, and so the female will actually have the babies inside of her. She gets really big, and then she just, has them, lays them out. Kind of like sharks, skates, and rays. These guys fertilize inside the body, just like guppies. So here's the problem. Fish don't really always care for the young very well. In fact, most fish don't care for the young. Guppies are a great example, or swordtails, which are both freshwater aquatic fish. The female will lay their eggs, give live birth, and then hopefully you netted them. If you didn't, good luck, babies. They'll have anywhere from 20 to 50 babies, and those babies, it's survival of the fittest. Get away from mom. She will eat you after a while. Just like sharks. Sharks will give live birth as well. The mother will actually be almost paralyzed while her offspring are able to swim away from them until she's no longer paralyzed. And if you're a baby that gets caught there, well, you just became dinner. There are a couple groups of fish. One is the jawless fish. These are hagfish and lampreys. They're kind of primitive, and they're kind of gross looking. These jawless fish have cartilage skeletons and very fibrous connective tissue. They do have their notochord. However, these jawless fish not necessarily have a backbone. Here's a lamprey. They're scavengers and live on the ocean floor. When a whale dies or a large fish die and falls to the bottom, these guys are the ones that feed on them. They eat small prey like worms as well. They can produce large amounts of slime when they feel threatened, and it actually will suffocate its predator. Could you imagine somebody putting so much mucus on you that it would suffocate you? Ugh. Then we have lampreys. These guys are parasitic, and these rows of little teeth will actually suction cup themselves to the side of a fish, and if these lampreys come off, you have a big gaping sore there that doesn't heal. After they attach, they feed on the host's blood and tissues until they've gotten their fill. and then they release them. They can live on a large fish for an extreme amount of time. We find these in our Great Lakes, and they're devastating the fish there. Then we have our cartilage fish. These have paired fins and jaws. These guys are the ones you're most common with. They have cartilage that's made mostly of calcium carbonate, which is the same stuff that makes up an oyster shell. Sharks are probably the most well-known of all these fish. They have a streamlined body. They're extremely ferocious predators, and they're covered in these triangled little scales. Now, that's just them, but their teeth is in rows. So they'll actually lose a tooth, and then they just grow another one back because they need to have these sharp triangle teeth that will actually just cut through prey in one bite. We have our bony fish. We know about bony fish here in the Midwest. Bony fish have a strong exoskeleton made completely of bone. Bony fish. They will also have swim bladders. They have a lateral line and all the fun stuff that we're used to seeing in fish. The gill coverings are hard plates, and most of the time when we see these fish, we know what they are because we have them in the Midwest. Unlike sharks, the bony fish do not have to swim forward with their mouths open. They can actually remain still and quiet. And you can see the swim bladder right here. Again, that air sac. And then we have our ovaries and our liver. Remember, liver is like our cleaning of the toxin stuff. And the swim bladder allows for them to adjust where they're at, that sink or swim motion for there. So here's what we got for our bony fish. These are the ray fin fish. These have a ray-like structure. They're tostoroid. These would be like our yellow perch. These guys are very mobile. They have thin scales. They have a complete symmetry, and about 95% of all living species of fish are tostoroids. Then we have our lobefish. The only 7 species of lobefish exist today. So one thing that's really cool about our lobefish, we can see these. You have these muscular triangle bones that support these, but we can see these lobes down here, and they're actually kind of cool. These bones are connected to joints. Joints. These are like what you would have in like your hand, your wrist, your elbow, all that stuff. And these lobefish we think are going to be we believe are the evolutionary step to the next stage, which is amphibians.